Welcome to my presentation, Teaming Up, Using Collaboration to Explore Learning Standards. So what is collaborative learning? Collaborative learning in a nutshell means to have students working together or students working with their teacher in order to solve a problem, find meanings, creating a project or a product. And I've also provided quotes here from Smith and McGregor, Chu Yang, Liang, and Chen, who basically have figured out that cooperative learning is just an active participation and interactive communication among students and teachers. So what are characteristics of collaborative learning? What does it look like? Well, your collaborative learning should include challenging tasks. In other words, it should not just be four to five students pushing an assignment together, doing their little part, and then just submitting it together. Collaborative learning means that there are tasks where there is research, trial and error, and different things that require every student in the group to have an active role, and you must make sure that these challenging tasks keep up their interest. It also includes interdependence. In other words, you need to teach, when you're teaching students how to work collaboratively, you need to teach them, first of all, that as a group, they need to come together and understand what it is that they need to be doing, what components need to be done to be completed, and what is it going to take to get it done. Also, jobs should be established. In other words, it doesn't necessarily mean that one student has to be in charge of the group, but it does mean that everyone takes a role and plays an active part in whatever the activity is. So they need to have some sense of interdependence. In other words, every student in the group must understand that they not only have a job to do, but that their teammates are depending on them to their part, to get their portion completed. So benefits and challenges of using collaboration in the classroom. I've listed benefits: students learn from each other. That should be your main goal. Remember, the collaborative learning is another strategy to be done in place of just the teacher standing up and doing a whole group lesson. It reinforces social skills in the life of today, where students are texting and most likely emailing and blogging. They're not talking to each other face to face. So when they are working collaboratively, it is forcing them to work with each other and have a conversation and work out differences. And it also promotes a shared leadership, and that kind of ties into the interdependence, where they should all feel like leaders and want to take charge, but also be able to push their own teammates to become leaders themselves. Challenges, Challenges for collaborative learning include keeping all of the students engaged, and that's a planning issue. Teachers need to make sure that their assignments are very challenging, that are going to keep the interest of the students, and it limits the possibilities of students just sitting around allowing the other teammates to work. Another challenge is learning and progress can be interrupted by incohesive relationships and conflicts. This is a big deal. This will keep a project from getting completed or an assignment to get completed. This comes from planning and practicing. In order for collaborative learning to work, you have to spend time with your students practicing how to be a team member, how to work together, and how to settle differences, because differences will arise. Prior knowledge. So learning can be hindered if prior knowledge of the skills needed are not successful or they're not established. So what that means is that when you are giving students an activity to work on together as a group, there should be some background or prior knowledge to whatever the standard is, or the task should be established before the students even start the activity. So this is also falls under a planning issue. Teachers need to make sure that they have pre-taught some of the material or have in some way prepared them for either the components of the activity, the requirements, and the behaviors that the students need to exhibit in order to submit a completed task. Classroom example of collaboration number 1. So the new craze are escape rooms where, well, in regular everyday life, escape rooms are where people go to a certain building and then they have to answer a series of questions in order to progress to different rooms to eventually escape. Today, they have different escape classroom activities where students work together and answer a series of questions based on their standards that they're working on, and it could be for any subject, and they progress to eventually escape the classroom. And I provided a short video, it's about 3 minutes, for you to view to see an example of a class doing an escape room on fractions. My second example of a collaboration activity is something that I do every year in honor of the Super Bowl. The students are given a recipe to make a Super Bowl trail mix. And their task as a group is to multiply that recipe as many times as needed in order to make a trail mix that would be enough for each student. So students here work together, they multiply their fractions in the recipe, and they, of course, they have to simplify their fractions. And then once they've rewritten and come up with their recipe, they then have to actually make their trail mix. And they're presented with another problem that they're challenged to work together to be able to solve, is the idea of the measuring cups. So I do not provide, let's say, if their answer was 6/8 a cup of Cheerios, they would have to simplify that and find out which cup measure, which I don't have a 3/4 cup measure, so they would have to then figure out and decompose the fraction to come up with how many times they would scoop the 1/4 cup in order to satisfy the 6/8 cups. So this is a very challenging task, but it does require them to work together in order to come up with a correctly made recipe and a delicious set of trail mix for Super Bowl. And that concludes my presentation. Thank you.